Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
It happened one time. It happened forever.
Hi, welcome back to Truth Be Told, Living with MS. I have in studio today with me Rebecca Naylor, who is also someone who is living with MS, emphasis on living with MS. Welcome, Rebecca. How are you today?
I'm doing amazing. Thanks for having me, Mary.
Good. I know how I heard about you. You have a video blog, and I think I watched your video blog. And let's talk about stress, baby, because stress was the reason that you had chosen to leave your job. And let's talk about that a little bit, because living with MS, a big part of it is living with and managing the stress in your life. So.
Absolutely, yeah. For me, stress is the number one thing that triggers my MS symptoms. So I've had MS since I was 17 years old. I'm now 38. I was diagnosed very young, and it was a hugely stressful time of my life when I was diagnosed. So even as a child, I started to understand that there was a relationship between stressors in my life and how I cared for my body and what was showing up in my body. So I kind of went on this mission for the next 20 years to do a lot of research on my own and try and make this connection between how I live my life and how MS does or does not show up in my life. And what I figured out over the years is that 100% it's stress. Stress is a causative factor in MS, and stress is an immediate, direct trigger for MS symptoms.
Now, your dad also had MS, and so you lived with MS all your life, not just with your own MS, but with your dad's MS. And when you and I were out, we were talking about how knowledgeable you were, because you had done a lot of research because of your dad and because of yourself. And you were saying that there are 9 pinpoints or 9 areas that you discovered when you were researching that you think, because of course this podcast is about giving people tools to live with their MS, because we want to make sure that people understand that that it's not a death sentence, and
absolutely not. I describe it as growing up in an MS family. So my dad had MS. He was diagnosed back in 1985 when I was about 7 years old. So, and I have no memories before the age of 7. So literally my entire life has included MS. And, I can remember doing the MS readathon as a kid. And then my dad and I ran the Carnation campaign, and we used to go to parents and tots, kind of learn about MS sessions. So I grew up teaching the other kids in the schoolyard with little electrical wires about, this is what MS is. It's like somebody cuts a hole in the wire and the signal gets fried.
Right.
And then here I am 17, I got diagnosed myself, and it's like, wow, why is it? And later my uncle was diagnosed too at 59. So I really started to think, I wasn't getting the answers I was looking for from the traditional medical establishment. So I'm a teacher by trade. I'm an academic. So I really started diving into research and the science and studying. And I eventually got myself to a place where I was pharmaceutical free and in remission. And I've been in remission for 20 years now. So people kept asking me the question, how did you do it? And it was hard to answer because it's such a complex answer. So what I did is I literally figured out, okay, what are the areas that you need to address in your life? Because there's so much that we can control. You said it's not a death sentence. Absolutely. It's not even a disability sentence. Okay, because there's so much we can control. So when people ask me now, what can I do, especially the newly diagnosed, I tell them that for me, there are 9 keys to healing. So those 9 keys are diet, toxins, movement, emotions, environment, community, cognition, gut, and mindset. So I'm writing a book on this topic, and I founded something called Chronically Well Club. So there's a video blog and all sorts of things I do to try and get the message out to the MS community about all the different ways that these things are addressed in my life. And it's about lifestyle medicine.
Right. And that's exactly what we want to get across with this podcast. Now, first of all, when you talked about diet, I know years ago I had, and I think I told you this, I had met with a nutritionist and a homeopathic fellow, and he was telling me one of the first things I learned was do not drink Diet Coke. Okay, don't drink anything with aspartame because there's a link. Aspartame, if anybody researches aspartame, you'll see the history of how many times the FDA had to put it forward to get it passed.
Well, all of these 9 keys of healing are really closely interwoven because you can't talk about diet without talking about toxins, right? Because our current diet is toxic, right. Especially the traditional North American diet. And so, if you were to look at this on a gradual scale, I mean, the very first things you would remove would be those really, really highly toxic, processed, chemical ridden foods like, your Diet Cokes and things like that. But I look at the top 5 for me would be like sugar, dairy, gluten, caffeine, and alcohol. Those, for me personally, are the big 5 triggers. But for people with MS, we need to understand that we can't just look at traditional nutritional advice because it's not about what's most nutritional. It's about what's the most anti-inflammatory.
Right.
Because we have an inflammatory autoimmune disease. We need to eat a diet that is going to not provoke inflammation. And so in an anti-inflammatory diet, that's why we don't have any grains. Not just no gluten, but no grains. No legumes, because they're a very, very inflammatory food. So even though they're very nutritionally dense, not good for people with MS.
Now, it's interesting because I've been to my GP, I've been to my neurologist, because I've been living with this disease for 32 years. Nobody ever said, like, Marie, you should go to a nutritionist. Okay, they never said that. I actually caught something one night on an infomercial that Montel Williams was saying, because as you know, Montel has been living with MS, much longer than I have. And he said, you know what? If it's an inflammatory, it's not going in my body.
Yes.
And, it's interesting. So, people listening today, how can they access your blog? You do have a video where you're talking about some of these foods. And
absolutely. So my main website is www.chronicallywell.club. On that main website, I have links to my Facebook page, which is where I do all my videos as Facebook Lives, and then I then post them on my YouTube channel that you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss any ones in future. I have links there to my Instagram blog, links to a number of different tools that I use myself and recommend for other people with MS, things like really therapeutic grade essential oils and some really affordable wearable neurotechnology tools, things like that. And I also do one-on-one health coaching with clients who have MS around the world, either through the internet, on the phone, in person if they're in Toronto. So lots of ways they can reach out to me. And to just respond to your comment about the doctor, that's something that I hear about all the time. Like, why didn't my neurologist tell me about diet?
Or even your GP.
And the answer is that it goes back to what government's mandate is taught at medical schools. And your GP and your neurologist are amazing people who went into the field of healthcare because they wanted to be healers. But unfortunately, what they did is they got trained in how to push pharmaceuticals, because that's what medical school is. They get trained on how to prescribe drugs, and they don't ever get taught about nutrition and other areas of lifestyle medicine. So, for example, I had a friend whose roommate went to medical school and graduated quite recently, and this is about 5 years ago, quite recently. And I asked this person, okay, now that you're a doctor, tell me, how much time did you spend in medical school learning about nutrition?
Right.
He said that there was one 3-hour lecture and that it was optional.
Wow. You and I are both from Scotland, best country in the world. But I know that when I was first diagnosed, we were looking at a couple of things. So was it hereditary? Now with you and your dad, no one else in my family has MS, but I know when we had guests on before, cousins, distant cousins had MS, so there seemed to be a thread. One of the things I found most interesting, and this goes back to what you were saying about food, is that MS is a relatively new disease. It's, believe it or not, it's only 200 years old, and it cannot be a fluke. That the time that it first appeared was when we started to move from eating where we grew our food.
Absolutely. It coincides with the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not a coincidence that all of a sudden when our manufacturing and our agricultural practices and our social and living practices all became mechanized and produced with all these toxic chemicals that made their way into our food supply and into our air and into our water, all of a sudden our bodies are rebelling. Like our bodies are literally saying no. And I say this all the time, the word disease means dis-ease. Your body is not in ease and your body speaks to you. So the first thing I always say to my clients is listen to your body. Your body knows a million times more than the doctor does. Okay? The doctor learned from a textbook. Your body is living it, is feeling it. Your body is a microcosm of millions of organisms that communicate in an amazing way, and they have an innate ability to heal themselves when we just get out of our own way. And they'll tell you when there are toxic things in there, whether it's toxic things in your food and your environment or toxic from your emotions, like getting back to that idea of stress. Right? Stress is way more toxic than anything you put in your body.
Well, I will tell you, I was symptom free for 20 odd years, and I had a situation at work with an employer, and the ongoing communications with this person had me at a level. I was so stressed that I had my first, and I'm not even saying it was a flare up, it was a full on attack.
Right.
And it was just because this work environment was so toxic that I was like, it was seriously, I was the first attack I had in years, and it was caused by stress.
For sure. I find people experience most of their stress through their interpersonal relationships, like spouses, parents, kids, or through their workplace. Those are the two primary places that we experience our stress. And we actually probably spend more time in our workplace than we do with our families and our home environment. So where you choose, emphasis on the word choice, to spend your possibly 40-hour work week is going to show up in your body.
Okay.
And if you want to know why your body's not happy, my first question to you would be, where are you working? Why do you work there? How do you feel when you're there? How do you feel when you arrive? How do you feel at the end of the day? What is your body telling you? Right.
Now, if we had, because I heard this week, I got a call from someone whose daughter has just been diagnosed with MS. Against the background of what you and I have just been talking about, right? What's the first thing you want to say to that person?
It would be exactly that. Listen to your body. So you and I have talked extensively about workplaces and how people with MS manage or don't manage in different workplaces. I just made a huge decision that I know you're aware of on September 5th of this year, just about 6 weeks ago, to leave my career as a public high school teacher, a 15-year career. And I've been contemplating it since year one. Right. I love to be a teacher. I love to teach. I'm passionate about education, and I love young people individually, small groups. But being in a high school, a public high school, especially in a diverse urban environment like Toronto, the last high school I was working at, there were about 1,000 people in the building every day between staff and students. And just the sensory overload alone, the constant stimulation, the bombardment of noise pollution, visual stimuli, constant movement, and then, the conflicts happening all the time, stress. The kids are so stressed, the teachers are so stressed, which creates just a really toxic, energetic environment. And then add on top of that the time pressure of trying to fit 3 years worth of curriculum into a single course,
right? And
then have your life running by a bell that rings every 76 minutes and constantly knowing that you don't have enough time to do what you need to do. I mean, I'm getting stressed out just remembering it.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, so let's talk about the big day, the decision,
Yeah.
and you were on Facebook, and what was the announcement?
Oh, the announcement was literally, can I swear on
Of
the
course
show?
you can.
The announcement on Facebook literally said, I just shit my pants. This is not a metaphor. It's a call to action, and here's how I'm choosing to respond.
Right.
So many of you know, if you're listening and you have MS, that bladder and bowel issues it's one of the most common symptoms of MS, and one that is almost never talked about, which is why I very publicly talk about it, because we got to just get it out there. You know what? We all pee and poop. It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And, it's, even though I've been in remission for 20 years now, I do have symptoms that ebb and flow with my stress levels.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And when I'm under acute stress, one of the things that will come up almost immediately is, first, I'll start to have urinary urgency. So I'll start to feel like I have to go to the bathroom all the time.
Right.
And I'll have frequency. It starts happening like every half hour. I feel like I have to go to the bathroom suddenly, really, really suddenly. Like you've got a minute or else there's going to be an accident. And then when I'm under really, really acute stress and my body's like screaming at me, hey, you're not listening to me. I need to do something so that you wake up and realize you have to get out of your situation. Bam, I lose control of my bowels. Now, this has only happened, I think, 4 or 5 times in the last 20 years. And these were basically the most stressful experiences of my past 20 years. So when I went back to school on the first day of school this year, I had taken some time off last year to explore being an entrepreneur as an alternative to teaching. And I started Chronically Well Club, and I was enjoying it, but I wasn't quite ready to make the transition.
Right.
So I went back part-time in the spring, teaching 1 hour a day and then 2 hours a day. And I thought I just wanted to try one more time teaching full-time. So I lasted one day. First day of school. First day of school. I went in. The kids weren't even there yet. It was just registration. It was teachers and the kids lining up for their timetables. And the environment was already so rushed and so toxic. And my to-do list was so long by the end of the day. And I felt so unprepared when I got home to greet my who knows how many new students the next day in my 3 classes. I just absolutely broke down, and I had massive neuropathy, which is pain that your brain perceives but is not really there. I had neuropathy all through my body. I had brain fog. I had balance and coordination issues. I was absolutely exhausted, like to the point that if I wanted to pick up a pen, it looked like a 100-pound weight. And so I was thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I didn't know what to do, so I went to bed, like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I went to bed because I was just so exhausted. No lessons planned for the next day. No idea what I was going to do. And then I woke up the next morning, again, in a panic because I had nothing prepared to greet these kids. And as I was getting ready for work, what happened in my kitchen? My brain gets the signal, you have to go to the bathroom. Like you have to have a bowel movement. My kitchen is about 14 steps from my bathroom. Yeah. And I didn't make it.
Right.
So the time between my brain realizing that at some point in the near future I might need to go to the bathroom and me completely, and I mean completely, losing control of my bowels in my kitchen was 14 seconds. And I made the decision in that moment that I would never return.
Yeah, I don't think that anybody who doesn't have MS fully comprehends just what it's like to be stressed. And if you don't have MS, you don't understand. Just the littlest thing can cause the most a huge amount of stress.
Huge, yeah.
Just running around in the morning trying to get your stuff together, pack your stuff, and as we go forward, and we're going to be giving people tools to live with MS. One of the things we're going to talk about is, organizing things and organizing your life because it's very stressful.
Absolutely.
And just even doing, in the morning, getting up and getting a shower and then running and get all your clothes and everything can be so stressful. By the time you get to the car, you're exhausted. So that's definitely something that we're going to be talking about.
I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And it's not to invalidate the fact that everybody experiences these stressors. Everyone does. No. The difference between those people and people with MS is that we experience the stressors, but then we also have to worry that the stressors are going to trigger our symptoms.
Exactly.
Which is an additional stress on top of the stress that's already there.
So cumulative.
Very cumulative. And that what you're talking about, that's exactly what one of my keys is environment. And that's what I'm talking about, your home environment and how you structure things in your workplace and what's on your walls and your systems.
Right.
Your systems. That's a huge part.
Yeah. Okay, Rebecca, I'm going to ask you I asked you about the newly diagnosed person. So tell me about this new venture that you're embarking on now. Just very briefly, tell me about what you want to do with it, what you're hoping for it, and how you think it's going to help other people with MS.
Great, thank you. Yeah, my mission with Chronically Well Club is to help other people discover their body's innate power to heal and to help them to recreate their lives, because that information is not coming from the medical system, which is where a lot of people with MS go to for that information. And so I want people to understand that information is within you. It's within yourself. The answers are inside. They're in your own body. We just have to learn how to listen. So I really want to work with individuals with MS, helping them understand their own power. It's not about me saying, here's the answer and giving you a magic recipe or a magic pill you can swallow. It's about me clearing the misconceptions that you have to rely on a drug or you have to rely on an outside person to tell you what to do, to helping you understand that the way your mind thinks and the environment that you're in and who you communicate with and how you challenge your brain, how you move your body, the things you put in your body, your emotions, how you communicate interpersonally, how you manage stress. All of these things are things that are within your control completely. So I often show people when I first meet them and they're asking me about, my mission and my passion, I show them this tattoo I have on my arm, and it says the word create. Right. And I had that tattooed there to remind me every morning when I wake up that it is my responsibility to create my life. And specifically, it's my responsibility to create my body, because my body, my life, my health, these are an accumulation of my choices. So what I do with my clients is I help them to understand basically how to make choices that are in their own best interest so that they can really live to their utmost potential.
And on that note, I want to thank you very much, Rebecca Naylor, for being with us today. I want to thank all my listeners. And again, I will stress that if you do want to get a hold of me, please just email me at marie@truthbetold.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll look forward to next time.
Thanks very much.
Great.
A place for a moment.